it's become customary on the show whenever I have a guest host come on that we will ask about the history with Jake, personal experiences, fandom, etc. What can you tell us about your earliest experiences with Jake?
Massive fandom of Jake the Snake. From his earliest beginnings, and I'm talking, I want to say the first place I ever saw Jake was Mid Atlantic Wrestling when he was an underneath talent that would always, have a good match. And then I saw his transformation, possibly where the most where I hated him the most was Florida Championship Wrestling when he turned on Dusty with he was Santa, and Santa caused Dusty Rhodes to lose. And the reason I exist in this industry is because of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and he screwed over my guy. And I hated Jake. And I'm one of those crazed fans that if you crossed me, it was hard for me to get you back on the side. I wasn't this like, I would still watch everything, but I would be like, man, you can't trust that guy. Then I remember seeing him in Georgia when he was the Georgia television champion. And then Mid-South. And even though Mid-South he was become a babyface, I hated him. I harbored resentment because of what he did to Dusty. I don't let things go. It is still real to me. Then WWE's Jake made me start liking him. And massive influence. My early ECW gear was based upon Maniac Mark Lewin, the Purple Haze, and Jake the Snake with the long, baggier pants.
Yep.
And of course, the DDT. I want to say that 3 people in the wrestling industry have made the DDT a believable finish. And the first person is the OG. It's Jake the Snake. But Raven and myself were the reasons. And Raven was such a big Jake the Snake mark. And I say that term because he truly was, and even like his promo style. But and then me still trying to find a finish while I'm in this feud with this guy, and I really liked Jake, so why not? And it's always been a homage, if you will, to Jake the Snake. Even the way when I'll be like, the signal Jake used to do where he'd do the clothesline and then he'd go for it. I would just, especially now that I'm 52, going to be 53, just me doing that, I'm going for it and teasing it is all stuff that Jake used to do because I've gone back I love wrestling. I'm a student of the game. I literally watch way too much wrestling in my life, but I go to bed every night watching wrestling because it puts me in a happier place. I watch the WWE Network and I'll watch territory wrestling, and then I'll watch a sitcom because it puts me to bed happy. And whenever, wrestling is sometimes a one-sided business for some, it always would be like, this is what I fell in love with this. This is why I'm still a fan. And Jake is one of those guys because he was so unique in everything that he did.
Man, it's awesome to hear you say that stuff, especially when you're running down his career and all the moments that you got to see of his throughout the territories and whatnot. Because as we go back through the show, one of my big goals was to talk about a lot of that stuff. Because ordinarily when Jake does an interview, it's always like, "Hey, tell us about Randy Savage and tell us about Andre," and it's a lot of the same questions. So Jake and I have been going through all of his stuff that's really not well known, and I mean, you can just see him light up too whenever we're talking about it because it's his first time talking about this stuff for maybe 30 years longer.
World class. Everyone talks about the great world class championship wrestling, but he was a key part of that Gino Hernandez, Chris Adams thing, and they're all feuding with the Von Erichs. He's also got Baby Doll with him, and he's just so unique and different. Again, and then when you meet him, he's another one of those guys. In my prime, I was 6'3", 255. Now I'm 6'1", knocking on 300. But he's one of those guys where you're like, holy crap, he's so big. And you think about always WWE, it was such a big man's place. He was considered tall and lanky.
Yep.
And I'm like, wait a minute, what? Because then you meet him and you're like, this is a giant man. And then the other part of it is Jake was a guy who like I kind of also patterned a lot of my career with him, especially in ECW. I didn't need the title. I didn't need the title to get over. And you would work with me and you'd move on to the title picture. And I always stayed the same. And this was by design and proxy because I was like, look at Jake, look at Hogan. You're going to work with Jake to see if you could draw, get people interested in you, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to move on to Hogan. But Jake was the litmus test for me. If you're in, and this is when I'm in the business and studying it, I'm like, you could be so over and still lose and still like, okay, he finishes his feud with Rick Rude and now what? Or he's having a semi feud with Hercules. Doesn't hurt Hercules to lose to Jake and it keeps Jake up there. So it was just amazing. But when you talk about his older stuff, always unique, always different. Georgia Championship Wrestling. Again, he was kind of like, and it's funny because people have been calling me this now because it happens because when you're older, like a Forrest Gump type of person. He's always around this greatness, but you don't always associate him with it. He was in the early Legion of Doom.
Yeah.
And that early Legion of Doom is Jake, the Road Warriors, the Spoiler, and King Kong Bundy. But the Legion of Doom really was Ellering and Jake. And then the other guys came in, but then there goes Bundy, there goes the Spoiler, then there goes Jake. So then, hey, I got these two muscular guys. But the workhorse in all this is who? Jake.
Yep.
And we all know his promo style was different. But his uniqueness and his selling, like you could seriously, if you're a wrestler or a wannabe wrestler, you watch him when he was a heel, even like, the Snake, how he'd back out on his hands with his knees on, like his body's on the floor, and he'd back out while he was kind of bellied out. And you're like, any moment that man could strike, even though he's not in a real striking position.
Yep.
But as a baby face, how no matter what, he'd be moving forward and sacrificing his body for what he believed in. And baby faces would always fight from his punch, how it always was delivered, the clothesline, which is still, it's 2023 going into 2024. If anybody is there, we've seen probably 7 billion clotheslines in the history of pro wrestling in both of our existence. If Jake goes out there, it's still going to be special because
Yep.
it's always it's everything he did leading up to it. So uh massive influence in my career and should be in a lot of people's careers as well.